Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Today we will be looking at Volibear against Kha'zix, mostly in Emerald Elo. Since this will be the start of a new series, the videos will be in the following format. First, the mindset of the early game and your runes, followed by the mid-game on what to do with your team. Then, prepare for the late game and what to do if you are losing the matchup. Now for the runes, I'm not saying that the runes commonly used by most players are wrong, but most of the statistics you find on popular websites aren't very helpful. This setup comes from my experience and observations with classic players. Kha'zix is a champion who never commit to any engages at all stages of the game. The nature of the matchup is a bruiser against an assassin, which usually favors bruisers, and even more so, tanks. But to reach that stage, you'll need to invest some gold. The runes you're given at the start of each game fall somewhere between offensive and defensive, and with Press the Attack, you'll only stack your damage and end up running around in bushes and with Conqueror, which is almost impossible to stack against Kha'zix. Aftershock, based on Kha'zix's playstyle, will only proc momentarily, and average players will avoid doing damage, making it good in paper and useless in practice. Since I believe Volibear doesn't need that rune, I recommend Grasp of the Undying. As odd as it sounds, it will give you the most value, because stacking health and will put Kha'zix in a tough spot from mid to late game. You could also go for Heartsteel, but you'll be needing a lot of gold for your first item. This setup finds a middle ground between preparing for the mid game and staying viable in the early game. Against Kha'zix, the question is whether to farm or to gank. My simple answer is that, as Volibear, you have both options, but your ganks are more effective. You're one of the few champions that can land a stun on click, dealing 60 to 80% of a solo laner's health if you execute your combo correctly. So, you should find a balance between farming and camping. Against other champions, I might suggest focusing fully on farming, but against Kha'zix, I went for counter jungling because I'm actively seeking a fight. Kha'zix is weak in the early game by definition, so we should be very aggressive. For the spells, I usually go for the bite, and if you are wondering why, simply because I feel that the bear feels stronger with it, and I go Q max for only specific matchups. Now, let's shift the perspective from a purely champion-to-champion analysis to a broader view. It's almost impossible to win a game solely based on two champions, because there are 10 players in the game. When it comes to synergy between our team and the enemy team, Volibear fits well in any team composition since he can serve as a frontliner, a bruiser, or a peeler. In other words, Volibear has the flexibility to adapt to what the team needs, and if the team doesn't need him in a specific role, he has the freedom to play as he wants. With Kha'zix, however, he can only be played in a very specific way. This predictability allows us to counter his playstyle by planning accordingly and preparing for the mid to late game, where Kha'zix is at his strongest. You'll notice that Kha'zix tends to avoid direct fights, so we should look for someone else on their team to play around. Remember, it's tough to keep any single opponent down for the entire game. The strategy of rendering him useless only lasts until the end of the mid-game. That's why it's wise to seek opportunities with your allies. Start strong on your own, and as the game progresses, begin shifting your focus toward making plays around your teammates. One thing assassins hate is grouping up. It's almost impossible for them to secure kills in a crowd. That's why, if we group, Kha'zix will struggle to make an impact. However, there are situations where Kha'zix has a better chance in group fights, particularly if the enemy team has a wombo combo. In that case, he'll lurk nearby, not diving in initially, but looking to clean up kills afterward. You should still aim for the best possible outcome with the tools available. Against Kha'zix specifically, I know I can win most duels and secure key objectives if we maintain proper vision and group up as 5 for coordinated fights. Kha'zix players vary widely. Some are exceptional, and others are average. But in this game, I'm confident I can control the tempo and dominate key areas if we stick together. Now, here's the truth about why I didn't mention the build until this point in the game. As Volibear against Kha'zix, there is no single build to counter his mobility. Only stacking HP helps, because if you survive Kha'zix's initial burst, you can withstand the full fight. For this match, I went for movement speed to keep up in fights and movement speed slows to hinder the enemy team, seeking any advantage over Kha'zix. While he can jump around and use stealth to evade, we counter this with damage over time, which leaves a trail even while he's invisible, and a sweeper to pinpoint his position in fights. When it comes to itemization, runes, and dueling potential between Volibear and Kha'zix, it's in favor for Volibear in duels and in favor of Kha'zix in the whole fight. Also, the one with the item advantage usually prevails, but if we're both even in items, Volibear has the edge thanks to his sustain and ability to stand his ground. After the mid-game, heading into the late game, you'll notice a shift. Every call now becomes crucial. We managed to secure Baron because we pushed Kha'zix out of the jungle. He's too squishy to challenge on his own and needs his team around him to create an opening to jump in, attempt to steal, and escape. But what if you don't have this advantage? What can you do in the late game against Kha'zix? First, as Volibear, you'll likely have a lot of HP, making Kha'zix hesitant to engage unless he's certain he can finish you off or has an ally nearby. So, the best approach is to stick with your allies. Only go for a side lane split push if you're confident you can take him down, even with his allies potentially backing him up. Otherwise, avoid risky plays since he can thrive off resets in these late game fights. In the late game, it's no longer just about Volibear versus Kha'zix, but rather about Volibear's team against Kha'zix's team. Another thing, what are the odds of winning a smite war against Kha'zix? Honestly, the odds are slim. Outsmiting him is nearly impossible because his high AD burst gives him a huge damage advantage. So, the best approach is to stop Baron around 5,000 to 3,000, bait him into a fight, kill him, and then secure the objective. In this specific game, Kha'zix doesn't have strong team synergy. His team consists mostly of champions who excel solo, which limits his ability to coordinate plays. Yuumi, for example, is sticking solely with her ADC, leaving Kha'zix without reliable support. This team disaccord makes it safer for us to challenge him in the jungle, pressure him in side lanes, and ensure that he's kept out of team fights. An important thing to always keep in mind is that most assassins in the jungle will build at least one defensive item, typically a shield that lets them dodge the next spell. You can counter this by smiting them, which removes that shield. So always aim to deny them any defensive capabilities. This shield acts as a second life bar for them. If you manage to do this, Kha'zix will be forced into a defensive position. He won't be able to engage, and will need to wait at least 30 seconds for the shield to recharge. By doing this, you create space for your carries to play more safely and focus on dealing damage. Don't forget that you, as Volibear, you are a champion designed as a boss-level character. Never shy away from a fight, and never let the enemy jungler freely dictate the pace of the game. After 30 minutes, I'd be lying if I said there's a general rule on how to win the game. At this point, things are uncharted territory, and everyone needs to adjust because you've been playing as a team for quite a while. By now, you should have a sense of who's strong and what each player can do. For Volibear against Kha'zix, though, once both teams have around 5 items, I believe Kha'zix will have the advantage in the long run. Not because he can kill you, but he can wipe your team. If he's trying to kill one of your allies, remember that you can give them a guaranteed second of stun, which is enough to interrupt his combo. Once Kha'zix is dead, your allies are free to play the game however they want, and you're free to wreak havoc on the map as well. And with that, dear viewers, we've reached the final play of the video. I hope you enjoyed this one. This will be part of a new series where I break down the game from the point of view of just 2 champions and their consequences and the synergy between both teams. If you have any questions about the matchup that I didn't cover, like alternative builds for Volibear or different rune setups, feel free to drop a comment. I'll gladly answer any questions you have. Just so you know, this is Emerald ELO, so I'm not an expert on Volibear. Never did and never will. There's always someone better. But this is my take on the game and I wanted to share it with you. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, take care and peace.